Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or good evening, whenever you are watching. This is Kathi Palmer with another edition of Cat Tales, and behind the camera is Ken Stomsky doing all of the hard work, and I just sit here and have the fun. So, today's tale, we have done many different genres of stories in the past, but we've done several that are really what I call historic fiction or historic stories. We did The Courage of Sarah Noble, which was historic fiction. We did Kate Shelley in The Midnight Express. That was pretty much an historic novel or historic story. And today I have one to share with you that really is, for all purposes, a true story. And I happened to run across it, of all things, on television. I'm very surprised that I never heard this tale before. Living in New England, I would have thought I would have been familiar with it, but I am not. And the name of the tale is The Army of Two. And it is about an incident that happened in Scituate, Massachusetts, which is on the coast, a little bit south of Boston, during the War of 1812. Now, the War of 1812 is kind of a forgotten war here. We talk a lot about the American Revolution, and please take some time to Google that quickly and learn a little bit about the Revolution, especially since we live in Massachusetts in New England and we were a hotbed for the Revolution itself. But the War of 1812 started after that, and we had hoped that we wouldn't have any more wars, but that wasn't to be. So, this takes place in Scituate when the American colonies had won their independence from Great Britain during the American Revolution, which took place between 1775 and 1783. We had hoped that we would have a time of peace with Great Britain, but that wasn't to be, because hostilities broke out again, mostly between France and Great Britain, and it erupted into the new country of America over territory and shipping. The War of 1812 with Great Britain was sometimes called the Second Revolution, and it really proved to be a big test of America's endurance as well as Great Britain's endurance. While it continued, the British Navy sailed along the coast, particularly of New England, and they raided villages along the way, taking their supplies and burning their ships. It was more of a nuisance than it was a real danger, but they were taking things that the villagers absolutely needed. Now, tiny Scituate was also a target for their plundering, and the people of Scituate thought that they wouldn't be bothered since they were a very small town, but that wasn't true. They became a target for the British, and in the summer of 1814, they had already been raided 3 times, with the British demanding ships and supplies from the town. The townspeople were on edge, and rightly so. And here is where our tale begins. Rebecca entered into the room where they lived. "Mother," she said, "I have finished cleaning and polishing the lighthouse, and the bed linens that were hanging on the line are all dried, and so I have brought them in. It is surprisingly warm out there for September." "Yes," said her mother, "it is a glorious day here, and we should be grateful, for winter will be upon us soon. It'll be our 3rd winter taking care of the lighthouse in Scituate, but the cottage that we have is quite lovely. I hope it is a mild winter, for the winters here can be long and hard and very cold." The sister Abigail said, "Yes, Mother, it is, but unlike today, it is very peaceful. When all of our brothers and sisters are here in the cottage, it is quite noisy, but since they have gone to the village, I believe I shall enjoy it for a bit. I might even practice my drum as loudly as I please, and no one will be bothered." "Yes," said their mother, "as you know, your father and your brothers and sisters have gone into town to visit with your Uncle Seth and Aunt Harriet. And I'm sure that your brothers and sisters will find many things to do for they do not see their cousins enough. It is quite lonely out here for them some days. And I know they will stay for a bit because your father likes to visit with the men at the pub and hear the news of late. I don't expect they shall return to the lighthouse until tomorrow afternoon sometime. But we shall need to keep the light lit, for the harbor is shallow and dangerous, and if ships do not know the way into shore, they can be easily damaged. And we must keep the lights lit a bit longer because the nights are longer here. Well, said Rebecca, sometimes I do wish that we lived a bit closer to the village, for we could see our friends more often, and walking around every day and visiting would be most pleasant. Yes, said Abigail, but the cottage here that we live in is so peaceful, and I do love looking out over the ocean. It is so calm, and the weather today is pleasing. It is a good thing that we do not see an enemy ship in sight, and it has been weeks since they have been there. All that I see out there now are the seagulls catching their dinner. Yes, it is a blessing, said Rebecca, and it is a fine place to live, and we are fortunate to have this cottage, especially on such a pleasant day as today when the sea is so calm. And it is a good thing that there are no British ships in sight, nor have there been for weeks. And we are hoping that they do not return. June and July were terrible months for us here in Scituate. We are just a small town, and we did not think they would bother us at all. But they raided our harbor 3 times, and it is frightening. Not only did they steal the supplies that we would need for winter, but they also burned our ships. One of the ships they burned belonged to your Uncle Seth. It is his livelihood. To think what we have to go through now because the French and the English cannot get along. We had all hoped that we were done with wars with Britain, but here we are fighting all over again. It is a dreadful time for us. Yes, said Abigail, and Mother, didn't they even steal our ships in the harbor? Indeed they did, she said, and more than once. Still, it is a good thing that the men from the local militia came into the harbor and protected us as well as they did. They stood guard there for weeks. We would have had more trouble without their brave actions. Luckily, it has been quiet for 2 months now. Perhaps we will be safe for a while, at least for the winter. But Mother, asked Abigail, Father said that the militia have left our village completely. Does that mean that we are now all out of danger? Well, Abigail, I cannot say for sure. Please remember that the men from our militia have farms and fishing businesses to attend to. After all, it is harvest time. They need to return home. They need to pick their crops and smoke the meat, and they need to repair their fishing boats and sew their nets for next year. Winter will be here, and it can be cold and hard in Scituate. Besides, let us not worry so. The British have not been back since July, and it looks as if they are gone for good. I do not think that the men would have left us unprotected if they thought there was still any danger. Rebecca thought for a moment, and she turned to her mother and she said, well, hopefully I hope you are correct, but still I do believe that the men would come back if they were summoned to fight. If we set off an alarm, I'm sure they would all return as quickly as possible. Oh yes, said Abigail proudly, we shall stand up to those British and send them packing. Do you remember the time that Father fired the musket over the English ships, even though we knew they were too far away for a musket ball to hit them? I was so proud. I should like to fire a musket at them. I could teach those British a thing or two. Abigail, said her mother, such talk. You are young ladies. Young ladies are not intended to fire a musket. It is dangerous. Well, yes, replied Abigail, but Father said we should all know how to protect ourselves. Yes, said her mother, that may be so, but I do hope that you should find another way to protect yourself that will not involve firing a musket. Still, I'd stand up to those British ruffians and I'd teach them a thing or two. Americans, we are brave. I would protect Scituate at all costs, even if my very life depended on it. Well, hopefully, said her mother, that will never happen. But still, if the time comes, let us not speak of those things, said her mother. It is too alarming. Let us think of better ways to spend our time. Let us remember easier things to do. I know, said Abigail. Rebecca, do you remember the time that one of the men stationed at the lighthouse taught us how to play the fife and drum? Oh, that was a jolly time. Yes, said Rebecca, it was the best time of all. I believe he taught us a couple of tunes, but I liked Yankee Doodle the best. It is a fine tune for someone to march around to. And Rebecca marched up and down across the room, humming some lines from Yankee Doodle, until she stopped and looked out the window over the sea. We played it so well together, said Abigail. Mother, I think you should come and look. I see something in the water. I see something headed this way. I'm not sure what it is. I cannot see it clearly. What is it? Said her mother, walking down to the window. Do you see a ship? I don't know. And then Abigail joined them. Or is it a whale? I don't believe it's a whale. I do believe Mother is correct. I do believe it's a ship. A large ship. A large ship, said her sister. But there are no large ships due into the harbor today. Father knows everyone coming in, and he would have told us if someone was coming into the harbor. Oh no, said Rebecca. I can see the sails and I can see the colors that it flies. It is a British ship. It is a British royal ship, and they're headed for our harbor. We must stop them. We have supplies for the winter, and we need those supplies, and the British will surely take them. We cannot let them land here. Rachel was quite frightened and thought, I do not know what we can do, but we need to get the militia to prevent a landing. I shall fetch the muskets, said Abigail. That will not do. Girls, listen. I shall have to summon for help right away. I shall go around the bay as quickly as possible, and with any luck, I can reach the village before they get to land. You girls stay inside. Yes, ma'am, they both answered. Take care. And Abigail, yes, ma'am, do not fire the musket. Yes, ma'am. And off the mother ran out the door to summon the militia to help. The two girls stood watching the ship as it came closer and closer to shore, and they became more alarmed as they saw it approach. Abigail, the ship is moving quite rapidly. The sails are pulling it this way. I don't believe that Mother will make it in time to sound an alarm. We must think of some way. I'll get the musket, said Abigail. I know how to load it. Father taught me. No, silly, what good would that do? We're only two people, and if you fire the musket, it can't go far enough to do any damage. And besides, if they saw the musket fire, they would only fire the cannon right at the lighthouse itself, and then where will we be? And she continued to watch as the ship came closer. Luckily, the tide was too shallow and the ship could not come all the way in, but it could come close enough to load some other boats. Oh no, they're climbing into two smaller barges to come to land. They're rowing in. Oh, Rebecca, said her sister, what can we do? And for a moment the girl stopped and thought. I know, said Rebecca, I know. Fetch your drum. You want me to fetch my drum? And what should I do? Hit them with my drumsticks when they land? Please do it quickly, please. And I need my fife. And she ran to the mantel quickly and grabbed her fife. Well, very well, said Abigail, but I still prefer the musket. Good. Now I have a plan. You have your drum. I have my fife. Follow me quickly. We're going to sneak out the back door and go around the edge to the top of the hill overlooking the harbor. Now, we'll hide behind the cedar trees there. We must stay out of sight. We must not let them see us. If they see us, my plan will not work. But what are we going to do when we get there? Shh! We're going to be a brave army of two, and we're going to chase that British ship away from our shores all the way back to jolly old England. All by ourselves? Yes. Now follow me. Quickly, the girls stepped out, and they hurried out of sight along the side of the harbor up to the topmost place they could find, and they hid behind a stand of trees. They peered through the leaves, and they watched the launches approaching the edge of the water. They saw it heading their way slowly. They waited anxiously until the British soldiers were close enough to hear what they were playing. All right, Rebecca, what is your plan? We're going to scare away the invaders, she said. But how? We are going to play our fife and drum as loudly as we can, as loudly as we've never played before. And hopefully the British will think that it is a company of soldiers marching to the sea to stop them. We must not be seen, or else they will find out that it is a ruse. Are you ready? Indeed I am, said her sister. And they played Yankee Doodle Dandy as loudly as they could. And they played, and they played, and they played, until finally Abigail put her hand on her sister's arm and said, wait, stop, look, listen, I think I heard cannon fire from the ship. Can you see what they are doing? Rebecca looked carefully down at the ocean, and she said, yes, I believe it was a signal from the British ship. I think they want the men to return to the ship. I think our trick worked. I think they decided it was too dangerous to land. They're heading back out. So do you think they heard us? Yes, but we will keep playing just in case. Abigail and Rebecca continued playing their instruments until the British ship, thinking they heard a militia marching to the shore to beat them, turned around and sailed back out into the harbor, leaving the town safe from attack. Abigail and Rebecca eventually made their way back to the little cottage at the base of the lighthouse where they lived. We did it, Rebecca, we did it. We saved Scituate from the British. I do believe that music never served such noble a purpose, especially Yankee Doodle. Yes, indeed we did, said Rebecca. I could not believe my eyes when I saw those barges turn around and head back to the ship. And not a shot fired, said Abigail, although I still would have liked to have fired Father's musket at least once as they were sailing out over the open waters. And the next moment, they heard their mother come rushing up the path and into the door in the cottage. Girls, I'm back. And I have to tell you about the most extraordinary event. I thought that I had reached the town quickly enough. And when I told the villagers what was happening, they all assembled as quickly as they could, faster than I thought possible. They grabbed their muskets and made great haste down to the harbor to intercept the ship. But when they got there, they saw the strangest thing. Oh, what, Mother? Said Rebecca. What did they see? That's just it, said their mother. Nothing. They saw nothing but open water, not a British vessel in sight. We could see something way on the horizon sailing away, but it was too far away to identify. I told the men what I saw, and they did not doubt my word, but none of us could explain why there was no one there. None of us could understand why the British didn't attack us. What do you suppose happened? Surely we did not imagine it." "No," said Rebecca, "we did not imagine it, but we can tell you what happened. You see, Mother, Rachel and I were an army of two. Abigail and I were an army of two." "An army of two? What do you mean that you and your sister were an army of two?" "Come sit on the settle with us, Mother, and we shall explain." "And Mother," said Abigail, "we did not even need to use the musket. We found another way to protect ourselves." And they sat down with their mother and told her what they had done. The War of 1812 did end shortly after that, as the British and the Americans mostly just tired of fighting. The end of the war truly ushered in a feeling of good relations and good times between the two countries. But interestingly, in the years that followed that episode, Abigail Bates and Rebecca Bates, who both did live in Scituate, Massachusetts, and both did help their father tend the lighthouse there, they told their story over and over again many times, particularly to the neighborhood children who enjoyed listening to it. As a matter of fact, later on, I heard that Abigail even sold copies of that story for 10 cents a piece. The house that they lived in is still there, and I do believe it is a visitor center if you would like to go there. Now, although some versions of the story do differ in slight details, because when we tell a story, we change it, we remember details, and then we forget things. So it did change over time, but it still pretty much remained to the facts. And it is a story of ingenuity and courage on the part of these girls. They were not young. They were 17 and 21 when this took place. Now, some people do doubt that it happened, but some historians do believe that there really was some truth to it. And as time went on, the sisters were honored as heroines in Scituate for truly being an army of two and saving the town from British invasion. Thank you.